This is Jake Anthony from Autism BC. I just want to remind everybody that twice a month now we're going to be hosting our Autism BC Adults Meetup group called Getting Together on the Spectrum. This is a online Zoom meetup group for adults on the spectrum, and we have individuals from all over the province who come to join us just to talk about issues and matters related to autism that are important to anybody who's on the call. So we would be happy to have you join us, and you can go on to Autism BC's website if you to find out more information. Welcome to Autism BC Talks. My name is Jake. I'm the program ambassador for Autism BC, and today I'm very pleased to be joined by Peter Cunnington, who's joining us from Vancouver Island. Peter,
Yeah,
how are you?
good. Victoria, BC, Vancouver Island. Yes, I'm doing very well. Yeah.
So maybe just to start off, could you tell us a bit about yourself and your journey on the autism spectrum?
Okay. Well, as I said, my name's Peter Cunnington. I am now 36 years old. Just had a birthday a couple weeks ago. My journey to autism basically, well, obviously I've had autism my whole life, but when I was younger, I was originally diagnosed first with ADHD, and so I went to these behavioral programs at this place called QA, Queen Alexander. It's like a children's hospital. And as I was doing these behavioral programs, there was a really nice man named Rob Lampard, who unfortunately retired, but he noticed that I had, like, probably thought I had autism, right? So he said, okay, and he did these tests and over a couple of days, and then they determined, well, officially Asperger's syndrome, but that's no longer a diagnosis. So officially my diagnosis is Asperger's syndrome. That's how I first knew I had it. I honestly had no idea that I even considered myself autistic because all the media was just didn't look like me. The people they portrayed didn't seem like me. So I wasn't even considering it. And then he said, okay. So I went to these programs that happened. I think it was like maybe once or twice a month where the parents would go to one room and the kids would go to another room, and we would just the kids would play games or like board games or hockey table or watch movies, and the parents would just talk in another room. And that's how I first sort of met others who had Asperger's and autism, and met a few friends there that I'm still a couple of them I'm still friends with today. And yeah, and then I got involved in some other groups, some that were not specifically autism, more overall neurological disabilities, others that I'll talk about a little bit later that have that are specifically to do with autism in Victoria. And yeah, I've done a lot of stuff like other things and talks and yeah. So
Happy belated birthday.
yep.
I know that you just said, that you have Asperger's, and, I actually have that as well. And, but, like you said, that's, a diagnosis that's not really used anymore.
Yep.
How do you choose to identify? Because, some people like to be referred to in terms of being autistic, or do you prefer person first language in terms of?
I just say autism. I'm on the autism spectrum. I just say I'm a person. I'm Peter. I have autism. I know. I say I'm Peter. I am autistic. I'm on the autism spectrum, and I say I have a I'm disabled. That's who I am. I'm a person with autism. I like to say person. I like to say autistic person rather than person with autism, because I feel that it's part of me internally. It's not something that kind of I got or I got later in my life. It's sort of me. It's always been me. So I like to say autistic person because that's who I am. I'm not with it, or it's not going to go away or come back, or like I have it for a little bit. It's always there. It's part of my sort of thing. I mean, I'm Peter first, obviously, but as a person. But then then I am an autistic person, and I have. I also like to say the word disability. I feel that it's okay to use the word disability because some people like to use other words, diversibility or other types of words. I feel that kind of undermines people. It really kind of is not good for our society, because everyone, you should be proud of being disabled. I mean, there's nothing, if we constantly use the word, I think it takes away kind of like the stigma and starts to make people more comfortable with the idea of someone being disabled, rather than kind of cutesing it down or using other words to try to make them feel better. It doesn't really help to sort of push the notion, because then people can understand this is what a disabled person is. There's nothing wrong. You just have a disability. Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of taking back the power, right, that people can use to hurt you and to use the word and to say, hey, it's it's not a big deal, right? Or it's not
Oh,
something that's a negative thing, right? So yeah.
definitely.
So, and why is language important in terms of, like, I know you just touched on, kind of around inclusive language and around, whether people, because, a lot of people, like you said, some people like to use diversibility, some, like to use the word disability. So do you want to maybe just talk a bit more about that and maybe your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think language is really important because it's important to a lot of these words people don't maybe realize were actually created not by disabled people at all. They were created by other people outside of the disability community to try to use like I mean everybody has different abilities. My mother has abilities that are different from my abilities. It doesn't mean she's specifically disabled. I mean, so I think it's really important to sort of make sure that we're understanding what a disabled person is, defining it, and it's also important to listen to people rather than come up with these words to make them feel better. Or a lot of times they use these words, oh, we'll make you feel better by sort of softening the language, but really it's done for the benefit. I feel most of the time it's done for the benefit of people that are not disabled and they don't really like special needs. Like what is like special needs to me is like everyone has needs. I mean, everyone has different needs or special needs, but that doesn't really identify what the person really is, or and it also doesn't mean they're less intelligent because a lot of times people have special needs, but they are way like above the intelligence of like Einstein. He couldn't even tie his own shoe. He may or may not have had autism. We don't know, but he couldn't even tie his own shoe. But he was like wildly intelligent, and so that doesn't really say anything. It just isn't really clear, and it's also kind of, as I said, it's put on by people who don't have the actual disabilities. So yeah.
Well, that's so true. And it really kind of reminds me of the expression, that's used in the disability community of, nothing about us without us, right? And, about not creating terminology, that's not created by people who have a lived experience with a disability. Because, like you said, if it's just making other people feel a bit more comfortable with, to make themselves feel a bit better, then it doesn't really do much for us, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah. Just in your opinion, what's the difference between autism awareness and autism acceptance?
On a simplest level, awareness is you are aware of autism, like it's out there, you're aware of it, you know it's there. But acceptance or education or understanding is going into more deeper about what it actually is. I mean, you ask a lot of people, do they know what autism is? They'll probably say yes, and then you ask them to describe it, they're a little confused. So I think it's important to educate people on what it is, and also being that it's a spectrum disorder. There's a lot of stuff in the media or movies that might portray somebody as autistic, but that's only one person's autistic because it's a spectrum ranging from people who are probably living with care workers or homes or other places who need a lot of help, and others, I mentioned earlier, Einstein, who could like brilliant and tie a shoe, but it's also like it also goes up and down in terms of like day-to-day functioning. So people really need to understand the awareness rather than just saying, oh, I know about autism, like I saw a movie or like a show or something. Well, that's just awareness. You're just aware it exists in society, but you don't really know what it's about, or who the person is, or where they come from, or how anything about the autism community, or just anything. So it's really important to move past awareness. Awareness is fine too, as well, but moving further than awareness into acceptance, understanding, and education. Yeah.
Great. And, especially I know so many people, they come up to me and say, I would have never guessed that you're autistic. And and I'm thinking, oh, great. They probably saw, Rain Man or, some other
Mhm.
movie like that where, like you said, you only see that one, uh, maybe part of the spectrum, right? Or that one, maybe that one person who might be that way, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like you said, it's such a wide spectrum that, yeah, people need to think it, I think, more broader terms in terms of just that, that autism is a lot more complex and that there's a lot more to it than what you see in the media and in films. So yeah, definitely.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. So can you tell us, about the differences between the medical model versus the social model of disability?
Well, the medical model, I mean, in my opinion, not being an actual doctor, so but I basically know that the medical model is like what you're diagnosed with, and it's like the symptoms. A lot of times it's like the symptoms of autism, like people categorize like a bunch of like stimming or other symptoms and other things that the doctors may categorize you as having, whereas the social model is like how you fit into society, how society is like you are part of society. Unfortunately, in the last few years, there's been a kind of a movement of these sort of autistic type characters that people think are autistic, and they sort of are part of the social. It's not really what autism is about, but kind of like a lot of people, like for example, probably have autism or Asperger's, who go to like conventions. So that's like the social model would be like what you do in life or your day to day, kind of like how you interact with life, how you go through life, how can you like talk to friends or like what it's like to day. Whereas the medical model is more like, as I said, symptoms, like actual like I don't know, like stimming or like what you can't do. It's also a lot of times what you can't do, like you can't do this or you can't do that. And whereas the social model is like more about what you are in society. Yeah, yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, and why should we move towards the social model of disability? For example, how the structures or rules or inaccessibility of society, is often why a person is considered disabled.
Well, I think, see, disability really only exists, in my opinion, because of society. Like, I mean, if somebody is can fit into society, like a lot of times, let's say, for example, autistic people are have problems with like loud noises, for example. Well, you don't see a lot of the symptoms of autism if they are in their environments that they enjoy. Well, if a person in a wheelchair has a ramp, I mean, they're still disabled, but they fit in a lot better in society because of these accommodations we make. So rather than having, I mean, there's some accommodations people need to make who have autism, but mostly I think a lot of times the society needs to make these accommodations to make it more friendly spaces as they would with other things like LGBT or different types of races or whatever. You need to create spaces where people can feel comfortable going to these places, restaurants, and I mean I've been to restaurants where the music was so loud I was almost deafened, and like it just really makes it hard for people to get out there in society because that's really hindering their disability. So if you make these spaces that are more inclusive to people, and it's a little more harder than with neurological disabilities, I feel, than physical disabilities. It's not just putting a wheelchair ramp on. I mean, some people even have trouble with scents, like strong perfumes or something. So I think it's really important to alterate society to these spaces that can help people to feel comfortable so they don't have to feel so isolated and can go out to restaurants and whatever they want to go to because they're more accepting or comfortable for autistics. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right because you're like you said. I think with certain physical disabilities, you can anticipate with making places more accessible, like you said, with ramps and with different accommodations like that. But with autism and with anxiety and with depression and everything, there's so many different things, right? So many different triggers, so many things that can cause people, a lot of anxiety or distress or frustration or so it's kind of yeah, no, it's pretty tough to be able to kind of cover all the bases, right? In terms of are we accommodating everybody, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So what could employers or the education system do to show autism acceptance? And so what kind of changes could they make? And if you could also tell us a bit about your experience and kind of your suggestions around that.
Well, I'll start with education. I think that's a really important thing. What I really want to stress is that people specifically, it happens more often, it happens with everybody, but I find it's more common with autistics, is they learn differently. Like they don't learn, our common way of education is very old fashioned. It pretty much changed during the Industrial Revolution, where we moved from doing a lot of skills to doing one or two skills. So we were taught basic skills like basic math. So we were learning these like basic tasks and routines. Now that might have worked for a little while, but now in today's society, we have so many jobs and so many things that I think teaching to people who how they learn and I said it happens more with autistics where they don't learn in the normal way. They learn in a different way. So maybe doing a model that's like unschooling or they learn in an outdoor setting or they learn in their own pace or they read certain different books or and I really don't think just sitting in a class like for hours on end teaching basic facts to people like Einstein made a very good quote. He said the education is about expanding of the mind, not about learning a fact. So I think it's really important to sort of expand people's minds and keep learning. And learning might be going to a music class, going to a art therapy or whatever, but it might not be the typical learning of facts, pounding in facts, because I think that is very bad for especially people with autism. I actually worked with a kid for a tiny bit and helped him with what's called unschooling, where he had to learn a certain amount of work, but he didn't have to be like, this is your math, this is he just learned throughout the day. And we went to art classes, we went swimming, and we got to do our own kind of thing. And I did that for a little bit. It was very good. And he had autism too. And that was really great because he learned way more than he did in school because the environment was better for him. He was out in the public. He liked to go swimming, for example. So we did a lot more swimming at the pool, and that's still education. He didn't like the other kind of like PE or whatever, but the swimming, he loved the swimming, he loved the water, but he still got exercise, so it worked great for him. And yeah, and as for employers, I think it's really important to focus on people's skills, like taking people who have autism and seeing what they can do, rather than what they can't do. Like, oh, he can't go fast, so we'll just give him a slower task. Well, that's the wrong approach. I think it's important to. I think we have a very great tapped-in resource where some people could do amazing things that they didn't even realize, and if you just give them the simplest of boring tasks, sure, they might be able to do it because it's easy and simple, but that's not tapping into their skills. So I think it's important to find their skills, find what they can do, what they're comfortable doing, and then also make it reasonable. Like if they have like lights that are really bright, maybe turn the lights down. If they find music is too loud, or maybe they even enjoy listening to like quiet music. I don't know. It depends what they enjoy, but don't just undermine them and give them those simplest boring like sort of jobs that shelving books on. I mean, those are fine jobs, and sure, some people can only do those jobs, and that's great if that's all they can do. But there's a lot of jobs that are untapped. It's a very great untapped resource, and we should be taking advantage of it and really looking for people who can do these great tasks and jobs. And with the very minor tweaks and accommodations, you could get some great employees. Just yeah, wonderful employees. So yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that's really an important message, to focus on people's abilities instead of their disabilities, right? And what they can contribute instead of what they're,
Yeah.
like you said, they're not able to do, or what they're, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that's a really good, it's a good message. Yeah,
Oh
definitely.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So, and what could friends and family do to show autism acceptance? So, what changes should they make? And, could you tell us your experience and maybe if you have any suggestions just on how family and friends can show better autism acceptance?
Well, I think what friends and families can do is really just ask what the person wants or needs. And even if they can't physically speak or like maybe they're nonverbal, you could still. I think it's important to get into their world. Don't expect them to come into your world. Go into their world. So if they like trains, like I have a friend who loves trains. We've ridden the train. I've ridden the train with him multiple times on the Via Rail train. He's gone over 130 times on the train, and he's so getting into his world is really important. Like the guy sitting, if a kid is say they went to a I don't know dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, and all he wanted to do was play with the trains. Well, don't say, oh, stop playing with those trains. Come sit down. Maybe go sit down with them and enjoy the train. Say, hey, what can I learn about your trains? Tell me all about your trains, and just get into their world, understand what they can do, and just talk, just listen, talk, or just spend time, and for friends, just be accepting, be a friend. Don't expect them to fit into any mold or model. They are going to act. People are going to act the way we want to act, and don't shy away if somebody is a little different or gets upset about something. Or I mean, you might not get the perfect response every time. A lot of times, people say, "Oh, we didn't say thank you like right away." Well, like he doesn't maybe understand. Like just give it some time. Like maybe don't expect an immediate thank you right the second right away. And just talk, get in their world, hear what they have to say, and just sort of be there. That's yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
It's a give and take process, right? You can't just expect people on the spectrum to kind of assimilate or to force themselves to be the way that other people want them to be, right? I mean, you have to try to get to understand everybody, right? And to
Mhm.
yeah, and to, like you said, to be interested in their life and their interests, and in what their the moment that they're living in, right? So yeah, that's
Exactly.
yeah. So now kind of, I guess, a more general one, what could, the public or society do to show autism acceptance? So, what changes could they make? And, do you have any kind of experiences or suggestions that you could share with us around that?
Society can just really make acceptance by, as I said, listening, talking, like hearing from the voices. If even if they can't actually as I said earlier, even if they can't actually physically speak, like they're nonverbal, but being with them, spending time, going to volunteer at a place that has a lot of autistics at it, or just providing spaces, or just making a really sort of environment that people can enjoy and have a great time in, but also just, as I said, like letting the voices of autistic actually speak. Don't assume that you've heard something in the media, or you are, even if you're a doctor, and you should spend time with people who have autism. You may know the medical model of autism, but you haven't, it's a little different than actually spending time directly in groups of people who have autism. And just, maybe like making autism awareness in the community part of your daily life. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I mean, you could just say that this place is an accepting, put a sign outside that says we are an accepting autism place. We will, and have like a suggestion box of what we can do, and make it like they do for LGBT. They put like a pride flag on the outside saying this is going to be an accepting place for the LGBT. Well, this could do the same for autistics, and they would feel like this is their place. They can go there and they can enjoy a comfortable environment, and that's, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
No, and I think, yeah, that definitely, promoting, pride in the disability community, because just like you said with the LGBTQ, community, is I think that it's, really important to, to say that, hey, we're proud of who we are, right? And, that it's not just that we want to be accepted, but, that we want to be recognized for, for the great things that we're able to do, and for, our accomplishments, and for, all the great things that make us who we are, right? So
Yeah,
that's yeah.
exactly.
So yeah, if you could just talk a little bit about kind of self advocacy and advocacy done by other people, just in your life experience.
Okay, well, advocacy. I'll tell you what I've done for advocacy. I mean, I advocate for a lot of different issues, disabilities and other issues and stuff. But for in terms of advocacy, I mean, I've done a lot of like online advocacy. I have spoken at a bunch of conferences. Well, we did a conference a few years ago. We've done it. We have stopped it because of the pandemic a little bit, but also it stopped before the pandemic. It was called well, one I spoke at was called Inclusion BC, and it was a conference for people with disabilities. This was not a specific autism conference, but I also spoke there the last time I was on in 2019, and I spoke about autism, and I spoke with a couple other people. We just asked questions like what it was like to grow up with autism, because there's a lot of parents that go to the event, and they may go with their kids or without their kids, and they no idea what an adult with autism is going to be like. They might be totally freaked out that their kid's going to be in an institute or a home or something, and they just, to hear from an actual autistic that has a job, lives in his own life, does functions daily, is a great idea, because it really is showing people, and that is a really good idea. That is, to me, a great advocacy. And the other conference we did was called Autism's Own Conference, and that was at UVic. Unfortunately, it stopped years ago, and we may do it again online on Zoom or something. We're not sure, but it was basically everybody in the conference had autism. And one year was great. We actually had panel discussions. Like, I think one was about education, one was about growing up with autism, and one was about getting diagnosed later in life. There's a lot of people who are like in their 60s or 70s who don't even just found out they had autism, because it's only been around for like 30 years in terms of its name. I mean, they always had autism, obviously. So then they're finding out in their 60s and 70s they have autism, and they're meeting others, and that's wonderful for them. Yeah. And so, yeah, the other stuff I did, just like online, talking to people. I mean, obviously, I did that. I worked for a kid who had autism, so that was great advocacy, because he got to learn from me, like, because I have autism and he has autism, so that was great. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much just online. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
No, that's great though, and and being able to work with somebody, and to kind of guide and mentor somebody who's younger, than you, who you get, and who you can, work with, and also, to, I think, especially working with somebody who's younger, right, to be able to say, hey, look at me, look what I've, look, I'm able to have a happy life and everything. So it kind of gives, maybe teenagers who maybe are kind of in that in between stage of of growing up and everything, where they don't know what their lives are going to be, right? So it's kind of
Mhm.
it gives them kind of maybe some more hope and just kind of feeling a bit more secure, right? About that, hey, that I can still have a great future, and even though I have these specific challenges. So yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So last question here is just really just if you have any take home messages for our audience out there.
I think the take home message is basically just to have people in society like listen to us, hear our voices, basically. I'm pretty much. I mean, just hear what we have to say, be accepting, hear, listen to us, take what we have and listen and hear. And I would like to also mention a couple of groups that I go to that are really good. One is called the Victoria Asperger Autism Society in Victoria, run by a great woman named Iris Gray. And right now we're doing it online, but we also go, we used to go to a coffee shop and we just met others. It's really isolating. People don't, unfortunately, when you become an adult with autism in BC, there is like the services are just dropped. They're just like next to no services, and people feel isolated. And some don't even have jobs, so they don't even meet people during their day and their job. They don't have a job. So just really to get people together, and I think it's really important for like. And I mean, it's been even more challenging during this pandemic because all the conferences and all the things have been canceled. And that's a place I met a lot of people. So I think just reaching out to people is great. And I think it's just a really to other people who just to make it an environment that's great and friendly. And also like hearing people's voices. Like there's a group in the States and one in Canada, and it's called ASAN, Autism Self Advocacy Network. And it's just a place where all the people there have autism. It's their voices. No one else, like some other organizations won't mention them, but other organizations that are not run by autistics. This is run just by autistics. So it's their voices, what they have to say. So no one else is telling us what to say. We are speaking for ourselves. And there's another one in Canada, which is very similar, called Canadian Autism United. Much the same thing. All the people have autism. And it's the same with the autism that the conference I put on. We put on at UVic a few years ago. Everybody had autism. No one told us how to run it. We ran it ourselves. We knew what we wanted to do, and people learned a lot from that. So I think just really just listening to what we have to say, and making sure that our voices are heard and not muzzled in society. Basically, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
No, and you're so right about the in terms of adult services. I've been saying to people lately, especially since I've started working with Autism BC and kind of fielding resource requests when I have adults reaching out saying Jake, I just was diagnosed as being on the spectrum, and I'm trying to look for um therapy supports or for meetup groups or what. And there's just, you're right, there's so little out there. It's almost like people think that you turn 19 and your autism just vanishes, right? It's a really, I don't know why. There needs to be more options in terms of assessment for adults, and definitely around more services and more support. So no,
Well,
I yeah.
I'll quickly say, at least for meetup groups, if you're an adult, they're not a service per se, like a counseling service, but you can meet others with autism. Go to a website called meetup.com, and if you just type in the word like disability or autism, I mean, right now most of them are online because of the pandemic, but you can basically there's one in Victoria, there's a meetup group in Vancouver. There's another one. The other one is more about advocacy. It's not really about just meeting. It's more like advocacy stuff. But they're one in Vancouver, and they back before the pandemic, they played board games, they played card games, they met at pubs, and I mean that's literally the one of the first groups I went to that had adults with autism, and to see others, it really helped me because otherwise I would just sit at my house all day, and I mean that's fine for some people maybe, but for me that would be very lonely and isolating. So just like go on a website, meetup.com. Maybe there's one that on Facebook. And if there isn't one, maybe you could try to just start one. Talk to your local coffee shop when the pandemic ends, or even try during this pandemic on Zoom, and just try to get people together and say, would you like to have a Zoom meeting? I mean, we had the last Zoom meeting, we had about 14, 15 people, and we got to know some new people. And there's like, I didn't even know this many people in Victoria had autism. I was like, wow. I was like, so yeah, yeah.
No, that's great. And I just want to say, before we sign off and everything, I really appreciate you coming on
No
Autism
problem.
BC Talks today, just to and I think you've really given a really good just kind of account of what, of your life on the spectrum and your experiences, with other people and with other groups. And, you're doing some really great work. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, keep it up.
All right. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
You
thank you
too.
so much. Yeah.